Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Fantastic Planet from 1973, or Planète sauvage, or The Wild Planet. Fantastic Planet is a cutout stop-motion animated film. It's a French-Czech co-production, and if you've heard about this film, you've probably either heard about the animation style and how unique it was and how unique the character design is and how kind of strange all of that is, or you've heard about the plot where it's a planet where humans are seen as pets by these larger aliens who are blue human type of creatures. You might hear about all those crazy things and wonder well, is this like a good movie, or is this a bunch of just strange 70s crap that people would go to just to, drop acid and smoke weed during? And while it was definitely that, also, it's such a unique film that you kind of can't not get into it in a certain regard. The plot's not that well structured. It is kind of taking on a lot of epic information in about 72 minutes or so. But it did win the Special Jury Prize at the Cannes Film Festival in 1973. It was very well regarded in its day, and I think that's because there's really nothing quite like this movie. And I mean that in the best way, because while you're watching it, you're like, wait, this is really out there. And I think that's enough for this film to really hook you in and keep you watching and wondering how exactly is this going to play out, and can this get any weirder? A futuristic, some say, or maybe different dimension, no one's exactly sure, but it's a different planet where these creatures called the Drags rule over everything and live much longer than humans, who are also on the planet but are called the Hommes, which is actually a play on the French word for human, apparently. One day after a woman and her baby are trying to hide from some Drags who are kind of messing with them, just flicking them around, because humans in this world could fit in the size of the palm of the Drags. They're literally like that small. She's being kind of just assaulted like how a bunch of kids would play with some ants, and she's eventually killed, and her baby is screaming and crying. When Tiva eventually hears the cries of this baby while she's walking with her dad, picks the baby up and then kind of adopts the baby as her pet and names the pet Tyr. And Tyr is a troublemaker, getting into things, interrupting the meditation that the Drags do, and it gives these creatures their power. He's always getting in the way, but Tyr also, when Tiva is doing her basically kind of going to school, but it's through these headsets, they call them info sessions, through the collar that he has that Tiva made to bring him back to her, she can control it with this kind of watch type thing. While she is going through her lessons, she has Tyr sit on her lap, but through the collar can actually learn the same things that Tiva is learning that goes directly to her brain. So he's learning things about the Drag society and their technology. He eventually runs away and starts living with the wild Hommes in the parks after they release him from his collar, and he starts telling them about the Drag's technology and helping them read Drag, and helping them advance as a culture, and eventually hopefully getting away from the Drags entirely. Fantastic Planet came out in 1973, and there are a lot of hippie kind of drug animation movies. Just look at the work of Ralph Bakshi, and there were a lot of kind of drug movies at the time, and this was a market that would really go on into the mid-80s. It went on for a while. When they refer to the 60s, the hippie 60s, they're really talking about 67 and on, and to be honest, they might even be talking about 68 and on, and that kind of attitude is more prevalent in the 70s, and you had a lot of films that were really just trying to appeal to the youth that's smoking lots of weed and doing mushrooms, and Fantastic Planet was not made to be that. You could make the argument that a lot of Ralph Bakshi stuff was, or that was just kind of their style, but they were appealing to that, and Fantastic Planet had been in production for about 5 years. It started in Czechoslovakia, but then because of various things with the communist government, moved to France to be finished. It got to take advantage of that market and played on the B-movie market. It did very well in France. It did well here because Roger Corman's New World Pictures released it, and it kind of played at midnight shows and cult movie stuff and B-movie things. And it plays on TV every now and then. It really was a film that the whole style of it, the strange animation, the strange character designs, the whole strangeness of this alien world, all the vegetation on this planet, all the creatures on this planet look strange and bizarre and surreal. If you were going to get high and see a movie, this was the perfect one, because you were always going to have cool things to look at. But you don't necessarily need to be inebriated to enjoy this movie. It's very beautiful. I've never seen an animated film look the way Fantastic Planet looks, and it has such a unique voice to it and a unique look to it that some of the problems with the plot and the story kind of wash away because you're just so in awe of it. Certainly having a narrator throughout and explain all this stuff that's going on, you kind of need it there, I guess, to kind of simplify it. That wasn't just an American dub thing. I actually watched the French dub. The main focus of it isn't a character. It's kind of Terre, and he's kind of the protagonist, but it's really about these societies and those societies changing and a class struggle, and the themes throughout it, a lot of people said, were a lot to do with like slavery in America, or about how we treat animals, or about conflicting nations having arguments. People have read into this film quite a bit. I kind of think some of those ideas are there. What interesting science fiction used to be, which is counter kind of these larger themes, though this film is kind of a film that's really banking on the fact that you will be wowed by it. It's still talking about something, but it's talking about something in a very broad sense, and in a broad sense that's interesting. It is thought-provoking. It makes you think about, just because we're so much bigger and that's insignificant, should I still treat it fairly? If I'm on a better position than these other people, should I still be kind and nice to them and treat them with respect? Fantastic Planet, using humans as the kind of insignificant bugs in this world, brings up that point very well. But you can read a lot of situations into it, which is probably what made it so universal and able to be released in several different countries and still be referenced to this day. Jennifer Lopez is watching it in the movie The Cell. I don't know if Jennifer Lopez herself is a fan of it, but it was featured in the movie The Cell. You can see Tarsim being a fan of this film. But I think its broad themes make it work and shows the kind of complicated sci-fi that it was living in at the time. The narration you get are kind of from Terre, but are mostly there just to make sure it all makes sense. I wouldn't mind seeing a copy of this film without that narration. I'm curious what that experience would be like. I don't think that was made. It wasn't how the film was intended. I'm curious about that because it's so strange and weird as it is. Couldn't we make it stranger? Maybe that was an attempt just to like calm it down a little bit. It is probably considered one of the most well-known films of French animation, even if it is a French-Czech co-production. And I think the director of this film, René Laloux, directed 2 other animated films, which I haven't seen or even heard of before. I didn't even know he had directed other films. I was kind of wondering, like, is this their only film? Like, I've never even heard of other films being made this way. And apparently they are, and they sound kind of interesting, and what he did and how interesting and odd those science fiction films are. This has an incredible score by Alan Gregorior. That's very 70s rock and roll, kind of jazzy at the same time, very spacey and weird. That's the other thing about this film, is like you kind of just get really into it. I've never seen a film or an animated film that through its score and through its character design, through all the weird, strange things happening, you're just kind of like, what's going to happen next? There are certain scenes where you're like, did you just put this in because it looks cool? After a while, that does get a little much. I can understand some of the criticism about this is that the storytelling's a little flat, that the voice acting is a little flat, which I would agree with. That makes it a little harder to get into. But there were times if I would get a little bored, something cool would happen, or they'd be a cool creature. And even though I knew what it was doing, was still kind of a remarkable thing to watch. You don't really forget Fantastic Planet. Anyone I've talked about with this film knows this movie because it just leaves you with such an impression, because there's only really one movie like it. That's a pretty awesome thing to watch, especially because I think this is a film that came around at a time where animation really was starting to be made for adults, particularly with theatrical films, and this film came out right on the cusp of all of that. And I think that's probably why this film is so known and so highly regarded, but it's also because it is a unique animated film. There is only one Fantastic Planet, and it has such a weird idea of this place where humans are kept as pets by these aliens, and it kind of goes on from there. One of those cult strange movies where you're like, did you see that weird animated film where humans are kept as pets? And it rewards you in your curiosity because it's such a strange and unique film. Fantastic Planet is something that I've always wanted to watch and always wanted to check out and see how strange and unique it was. It definitely took me on a weird, strange journey, and an unforgettable one at that. And its uniqueness is really what makes it so special. It has just too much uniqueness that you kind of can't not be just in shock at like, what did I just see? You know, some of it might look like typical 60s character design and stuff you've seen in the Yellow Submarine and so forth, but not really. You know, it's cutout animation, it's strange score, it's weird premise. It has too many of those things, so at a certain point you're just like, holy shit, what have I just experienced? And Fantastic Planet has that all going throughout it to make a truly unique animated film. So if you have seen Fantastic Planet and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.